For what purpose does the gentlelady from California, Ms. Eshoo, seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 2A.1 of Rule 9, I rise to give notice of my intent to raise a question of the privileges of the House. I ask unanimous consent that the form of the resolution appear in the record at this point.
Is there objection to dispensing with the reading of the notice? Without objection, the form of the resolution will appear in the record at this point. The chair will now recognize the gentlewoman from California to offer the resolution just noticed. Does the gentlewoman offer the resolution?
I do, Mr. Speaker.
The clerk will report the resolution.
Whereas in the United States system of balances, Congress has a responsibility to hold the executive branch of government to the highest standard of transparency to ensure the public interest is placed first. Whereas, according to the Tax History Project, every president since Gerald Ford has disclosed their tax return information to the public.
In order.
Clerk will suspend. House will be in order. The clerk may continue.
Whereas tax returns provide an important baseline disclosure because they contain highly instructive information, including whether the candidate paid taxes, what they own, what they have borrowed, and from whom, whether they have made any charitable donations, and whether they have taken advantage of tax loopholes. Whereas disclosure of the president's tax returns could help those investigating Russian influence in the 2016 election understand the president's financial ties to the Russian Federation and Russian citizens, including debts owed, and whether he shares any partnership interests, equity interests, joint ventures, or licensing agreements with Russia or Russians. Whereas the New York Times has reported that President Trump's close senior advisors, including Carter Page, Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, and General Michael Flynn, have been under investigation by the Federal Bureau of Investigation for their ties to the Russian Federation. Whereas Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryakov told Interfax, a Russian media outlet, on November 10, 2016, that there were contacts with Donald Trump's 2016 campaign, and it has been reported that members of President Trump's inner circle—
Clerk will suspend. Members of the House, the disturbances in the House chamber are bipartisan. And it is important that members take their conversations from the floor. The clerk will continue.
Were in contact with senior Russian officials throughout the 2016 campaign, whereas, according to his 2016 candidate filing with the Federal Election Commission, the president has 564 financial positions in companies located in the United States and around the world. Whereas, against the advice of ethics attorneys and the Office of Government Ethics, the president has refused to divest his ownership stake in his businesses. Whereas the director of the Nonpartisan Office of Government Ethics said that the president's plan to transfer his business holdings to a trust managed by family members is meaningless and does not meet the standards that every president in the past 4 decades has met. Whereas the Emoluments Clause was included in the U.S. Constitution for the express purpose of preventing federal officials from accepting any present emolument, office, or title from any king, prince, or foreign state. Whereas, according to the Washington Post, the Trump International Hotel in Washington, D.C. has hired a director of diplomatic sales to generate high-priced business among foreign leaders and diplomatic delegations. Whereas, according to Reuters, the Trump International Hotel could receive up to $60,000 from the Kuwaiti government for a party it held at the hotel on February 22, 2017. Whereas, according to the New York Times, the president used a legally dubious tax maneuver in 1995 that could have allowed him to avoid paying federal taxes for 18 years. Whereas the most signed petition on the White House website calls for the release of the president's tax return information to verify compliance with the Emoluments Clause with 1,078,000 signatures as of the date of this resolution. Whereas the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Joint Committee on Taxation, and Senate Finance Committee have the authority to request the president's tax returns under Section 6103 of the Tax Code. Whereas the Committee on Taxation reviewed the tax returns of President Richard Nixon in 1974 and made the information public. whereas the Ways and Means Committee used IRC 6103 authority in 2014 to make public the confidential tax information of 51 taxpayers. Whereas the American people have the right to know whether or not their president is operating under conflicts of interest related to international affairs, tax reform, government contracts, or otherwise. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the House of Representatives shall, 1, immediately request the tax return information of Donald J. Trump for tax years 2006 through 2015 for review in closed executive session by the Committee on Ways and Means, as provided under Section 6103 of the Internal Revenue Code, and vote to report the information therein to the full House of Representatives. 2, support transparency in government and the long-standing tradition of presidents and presidential candidates disclosing their tax returns.
Does the gentlewoman from California wish to present argument on the parliamentary question whether the resolution presents a question of the privileges of the House?
I do, Mr. Speaker.
Gentlewoman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentlelady, suspend. Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Under Clause 1 of Rule 9, questions of the privileges of the House are, quote, those affecting the rights of the House collectively, its safety, dignity, and the integrity of its proceedings. I believe the dignity and the integrity of the House are put at risk when this body refuses to exercise its statutory authority and constitutional obligation to operate as a check on the executive branch. Under Section 6103 of the Internal Revenue Code, 3 congressional committees have jurisdiction to request tax returns: House Ways and Means, Senate Finance, and the Joint Committee on Taxation. This authority was placed in the tax code by Congress in 1924 to allow for full investigations of several scandals in the Harding administration, including the Teapot Dome bribery scandal. Section 6103 was the subject of considerable debate in this chamber, but ultimately Congress passed it in order to provide an important investigatory check on the executive branch. In 1974, Section 6103 authority was used by the members of the Joint Committee on Taxation to publish a staff report on President Nixon's tax returns, revealing that he owed nearly $500,000 in back taxes. Today, I worry that we're rapidly approaching a scandal of a similar magnitude to these previous events. Since we voted on a similar resolution last week, the Attorney General and other senior administration officials have admitted that they met with Russian officials during the campaign and the transition period. This comes after the campaign and unequivocally last year saying that there was, quote, no communication between the campaign and any foreign entity during the campaign.
That she needs to confine her remarks to the parliamentary question of whether the resolution qualifies under Rule 9.
I understand, and I'm working to establish that case.
Gentlelady will confine her remarks to that theme, or the chair will be prepared to rule.
Further reports about the President's potential conflicts of interest suggest the House should exercise its oversight authority immediately, including massive foreign payments to the President's hotels and prior business deals with foreign oligarchs around the world. The only way to determine whether these dealings represent—
Gentlelady will suspend.
Yes.
Gentlelady will suspend. The gentlelady wished to present an argument as to whether the resolution qualifies under Rule 9. The chair is patient, but the gentlelady needs to make that argument. If not, the chair is prepared to